streamed. I'm Kevin Woodhouse, City Manager of Pacifica, and we are a small and intimate but mighty and brain-powered with the good food group tonight to talk about this very important topic of the economic opportunities study. And Cosmont Companies is here, 3 representatives. Ken Hira, principal, I'll introduce in a minute, will guide us through the research they've done thus far. This is the second community workshop in the economic opportunity study. The first one was held virtually via Zoom a couple months ago. I forget the date. August, yeah, time's flying. It's been busy. And so again, I want to thank each of you for being here. I think at a certain point, we'll probably just consolidate tables together and have 1 or 2 good group discussions because of the number of people that are here. I do want to introduce the 2 council members that are here. We have Mayor Mary Beer in the back, and Council Member Sue Beckmeyer here. Due to Brown Act limitations, council members are observing but not participating in the conversation tonight, just as we did at the housing element meetings as well. So the economic opportunity study, I want to frame this just for a second, and then before I turn it over to Ken, it really is a critical component to the larger Vision 2025 and beyond financial sustainability study that the concept of it was launched a couple years ago, and then we've been implementing it. And there were various components to the Vision 2025 and beyond study, one of which, as many of you probably know, was an analysis of the operating revenues, the city's operating projected structural deficit that we have, which led to the council's unanimous decision to put Measure Y on the ballot, the half-cent sales tax measure. So when we're talking about economic sustainability for a city, there's really 3 legs to that stool. The first, which Pacifica has done very diligently over a long period of time, is to constrain expenditures and to, otherwise people might call that cuts over the years, but Pacifica has done that year after year after decade. The other is to try to enhance revenues through economic development activities, and that's really a core focus of this economic opportunities study. And then the third stool to the leg is what is, just happened, is still in process, is a voter-approved revenue measure to bring in annual operating revenues so that we can balance the budget continuing operating, not hopefully at a structural deficit. So tonight's focus on the economic side is really that economic development. What are our business zones in the future going to look like? How are they going to serve the residents of the community? What's the vision for those? And I don't want to just view it from an economic standpoint, but that's an important one. There's also a livability and a sustainability community that the economic opportunities discussion focuses on, and we'll get into that very shortly here. So I want to introduce Ken Hira from Cosmont, turn it over to him. I want to give a shout out to the city staff members that are here, Yulia Carter, Assistant City Manager, there's Yulia right there, and Alyssa Bronte in the Economic Development Program, and we have Mario from Finance back there as well. We have several staff because depending on the crowd, we needed facilitators for all the tabletop discussions. Planning Director Christian Murdoch. We have our consultant Brian Mora from RGS helping. And did I miss any other staff? I believe that's all. And then Cosmont Companies, I'll let Ken introduce his team. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thanks everybody for showing up tonight. I think the food was an attempt at motivating a few folks to come for input. We need community input, and so this is our second meeting. As Kevin mentioned, my name's Ken Hira. I'm the president of Cosmont Companies. My colleagues are here, Tom Jarofsky, who's a senior advisor, Bobby Valenti, who is a vice president, And we're a company that's been in business for about 36 plus years doing economic development. So we've worked with a lot of communities. We find that we understand economic development and real estate. However, each community is unique. Each community has its own circumstances. And then certain things are going on in the industry and the market that are going to have an impact on economic development. And as Kevin mentioned, part of the issue is how do communities and cities like Pacifica attempt to create a sustainable revenue stream as we look at an evaluation of a general fund or where the revenues come from and how they come into their general fund and how they pay for certain services. What's important is to know what the sources of those revenue streams are. And as land use is changing so dramatically, something we tell a lot of our clients these days or discuss with a lot of our clients, a lot of our cities, is everything's changing. So retail's changing, hotels are changing, residential's changing, industrial's changing, office is changing, catalyzed by a whole variety of things, not the least of which was a pandemic and the economy and the way the consumer behaves. So what I'm going to do is walk through a presentation. There's a lot of information that we have. It's actually a bit of a snippet into our ultimate report. We're going to produce an economic opportunities study for the city. We're going to try to deliver that by the end of the year, by next month, so that staff can evaluate it and give us some feedback and then ultimately make a presentation after the first of the year. But it's driven by community input. It's driven by analytics. And so I want to walk through that first and maybe take 15 or 20 minutes. And then we have a series of questions that we're trying to ask you all, members of the community, to help give us continued feedback in this process. So let's see. Well, Yulia, it's always about technology. It was working earlier, I promise. I tested it myself. Am I supposed to point it somewhere? If not, we can just stare at the screen for the next 20 minutes. I think it just... Yeah, if we can get to the next slide, I can get into this. The premise, the data that we've collected to date is, again, pretty detailed. It's something that I'm going to go over in summary. Here's our table of contents. We have some preliminary findings. Again, we're trying to get feedback, but we also want to share with you all what we've uncovered thus far. We have market research and analysis. We have community input already that we've gathered to date. We're going to definitely talk about the business districts, which is what these boards represent, 5 business districts. And then, a big part of our discussion as we break apart is going to be the opportunity sites. So if we can go to the next slide. I've shared some of this with you, but I'm just going to repeat things that focus in on the big picture. Shifting consumer preferences and land use, uncertain economic realities. It makes it really important for the city of Pacifica to understand the opportunities within the districts and how development is so important to, again, that ultimate sustainability of economic viability for a city. And our approach was to definitely do a lot of analytics, which we've done, and also get stakeholder feedback. Next slide. Okay, here's our objectives for tonight. Present some of this information, have a group discussion. We want it to be as open and transparent and honest as possible for the members of the public. Please express your opinions about how you feel, what you think, what your experiences are. We have a series of questions which I'll go through at the end, but it's to have that open dialogue tonight. And then as we gather further community input from you all, we will incorporate that into our final report. Here's a summary of some of our findings. Commercial real estate and commercial activity within the city has been fairly stable or stagnant, however you want to look at it, over the last 10 years in the city of Pacifica. There hasn't been a lot of activity in terms of commercial development. Tax revenues, as you can tell, they have been growing. Sales tax is providing 10% of your overall general fund. Transient occupancy tax, which comes from your hotels, generates about 7% of the overall general fund. I'll give you one perspective on the 10% of sales tax revenue, that the average across the state of other cities is about 22%. So your sales tax revenue on a relative scale is pretty low. You're relying a lot on property tax on a relative scale, and the property tax is generally being generated by high value of residential real estate. There's a lot of traffic and activity that comes along Coast Highway. A lot of folks are traveling up and down. And at the end of the day, a lot of those trips, the major majority of those trips, are from folks that aren't from the city necessarily. So you have a lot of travelers coming up and down one. And one question would be on our end, okay, well, how do we take advantage of all the trips that are going along that highway? And how can we try to leverage the opportunities that we have within our 5 districts? We've prepared a SWOT, which is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis. And again, there's 5 districts, and we've put those up on boards for reference. A lot of information here, but to say that the retail market has basically been relatively stable and sort of flat in its growth. The office market, yes, the vacancy rates have come down over the last 10 years, but you have a very small office market. It's not a robust office market per se. Multifamily, one thing you can tell is look at what rents are doing when it comes to multifamily, which is apartments. And the reason is because there's just such a lack of supply, which is a broader issue for our state and most communities. And that's also the reason why the state has created these RHNA requirements, the Regional Housing Needs Assessments, at which you gave input for the housing element workshops. But at the end of the day, rents basically are going up, and that's because we have a lack of supply of housing. This is the traffic volumes. I won't go through a lot of this, but you can tell the research and homework that we've done. This report will ultimately be made public to you all, so we have volumes of traffic. And then sales tax revenue. One interesting thing to point here is you can tell how the growth has taken place from 2016. The dark line is the city. One of the dotted lines is Half Moon Bay. It's hard to distinguish. One of the dotted lines is San Mateo. Suffice it to say that Pacifica sales tax revenue has grown. It clearly came back down to a lower level because of COVID, and it's come back up. And its drop in activity, the drop in sales revenue, was less than what Half Moon Bay experienced, was less than what the county experienced, which the interesting point there is that those places got hit harder on a relative scale than your community. Here's this budget picture, which is a pie chart I mentioned earlier. Basically 10% of your tax revenues come from sales tax, and a majority, probably 2/3, comes from property tax type revenues. For those folks who understand sort of tax revenues as a result of developments, what we've done is we tried to take an illustration of a 1-acre parcel of real estate. And we said, if that 1-acre parcel were to be developed with varying scenarios, on the left, it's a 10,000 square foot commercial services building, let's say, 10,000 square feet of traditional retail, 10,000 square foot restaurant, a 50-unit multifamily housing project, a mixed-use 40-unit housing project, and 5,000 square feet of commercial or retail. And on the far right, it's a 60-room upscale hotel. The results on the bottom are the revenues that would inure to the benefit of the city's general fund. And it's really simple. And is it hard to read? And I'm sorry if it is. But $375,000 is what would come off of a hotel. And the reason is because transient occupancy tax is one of these direct, pretty high value propositions for cities to collect revenues from a project that could be the same scale, if you will, the same developability on 1 acre as retail and even multifamily. It also tells us that multifamily at a mixed-use project or even just pure multifamily at $75,000 to $80,000 of revenue is a pretty high-value proposition for a city, whereas we have always thought that retail is a big revenue generator, which it has been in the past. Question?
Yes, my question is about residential in particular, because residential is also a bigger drain on the city, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a very good question. The question was related to if this is a gross impact, that's how we use those terms, what's the net impact? And I'm glad you asked that because there clearly is a netting of the bottom line for the services that are required for a residential project. There is. Our experience, though, has found that while one instinct is residential is always negative, in our recent analysis, it does not result in it being always negative per se. It matters on the value of it. It matters on the tax apportionment. It matters on the services that are needed. We're actually working on another city, working kind of on an economic strategy. There's a big mall that's about to get converted to a lot of residential. We're doing the fiscal impact analysis, net. And we're trying to understand for that community, is it negative? Or is it even a break even? Because if it's a break even, you could be doing better because of the indirect benefit of residents, because you're solving other issues. You're solving a housing shortage problem. The folks that move in and live there have disposable income. They're actually helping in an indirect way other parts of a community like retail. And so, it's not an exact science per se, but this wanted to show the relativity from a gross revenue perspective of the impact of these different types of projects. Okay. I won't go through a lot of this, but strengths, there's many strengths for the city of Pacifica. There's challenges, there's some opportunities, and there's definitely some big picture threats. We have lots of comments from the community and stakeholders. Again, we're going to gather more tonight. And this is the comments from the virtual meeting in August that I don't know if any of you had participated in. Maybe you did. I think I see a familiar face. So we want those comments to be reflected here, and we want them to be reflected tonight. We've done a survey that I think got pretty good feedback. That survey, which was online, indicated what is extremely important, what's somewhat important, and then what's really not that important at all, so to speak. And so we color-coded many of those results. Restaurants and dining options tends to be very important. Leisure and entertainment, shopping and retail, and places to go. They make a big difference. At least that's what we gathered from the online survey. And then the rest of the options are there. So business districts, 5 business districts, sort of from north to south. We've analyzed demographically each of those business districts that can try to help us understand the DNA of those districts. And then we've gone into a deeper analysis for each of the 5. The first one's Pacific Manor or the Fairmont area. And what you can tell just as a salient point is sales tax has basically been relatively flat, even though that district generates the most amount of tax revenues of the 5 districts. So very interesting for us. Here's the aerial of the shopping centers. And then we use a platform that's a mobile data analytic platform. It's called Placer AI. It's an artificial intelligence platform that, like it or not, tracks us wherever we go because our cell phones are like little radar detectors. And so the foot traffic, it's a very powerful tool because the foot traffic, and clearly we all know what happened during COVID, the foot traffic clearly decreased for the shopping centers here. But the question is, are we back to our pre-COVID, pre-pandemic levels or not? And the graph that you see there in red is telling us we're back in this particular district. And this is Pacific Manor. The other one was Fairmont. So Pacific Manor actually has done much better than what it did pre-COVID, specifically that shopping center. Some photos, and then some potential opportunities. It's the gateway from the north. Signage. We've got feedback from folks. We notice it ourselves. Can we improve signage? Yes or no? There's not that much to really develop there as an opportunity site. And Fairmont's a pretty strong shopping center as well, but signage at Pacific Manor, we thought, was one opportunity, and some refurbishment seemed warranted there. So if we keep going through Sharp Park, you can clearly see an increased sales tax history here. And there's, in our estimation, at least 2 opportunity sites in the Sharp Park area. That's going to be part of our questions that we want to talk to you about when we break apart. In the district here, you have a Beach Boulevard hotel site that's been around for a while. And then you also have several opportunities within the Palmetto sort of quote-unquote downtown environment. So there are some photos. This is an indication of how well Eureka Square has done in its comeback pre-pandemic in terms of foot traffic. I'm sorry, let me go back real quick. And then in terms of potential opportunities, again, Palmetto acting as a downtown. Beach Boulevard is pretty well suited for a hotel or commercial development. There are vacant parcels in Palmetto. Also the notion of can Palmetto as a downtown have a concept of mixed or blended uses, which is a combination of residential and retail, generally speaking. So in Rockaway is not really about sort of sales tax. It's about transient occupancy tax. 3/4 of your hotel rooms are in the Rockaway area. When you look at the placer information, what you'll find, and I haven't focused on this as much on these other districts, if you can tell the dark line that's dotted on the map to the right, that's your city boundary. All of the orange are the locations from which people are coming to go to Rockaway. And what it's really saying is there's a regional draw that brings lots of visitors from out of town into that area. And that has something to do with hotels, and has something to do with, being a sort of a cool place within your community to come and visit and walk around and enjoy some of the waterfront and enjoy some of the restaurants. So it's got a reach, and that's what Placer AI tells us. It's got to reach much beyond necessarily a local community. So main tourism center, district's got large concentrations of hotel rooms, obviously, limited parking, multiple landowners, and the quarry site. The quarry site, which is here identified, is a topic that we're going to talk about in terms of an opportunity site tonight. Lindemar, pretty strong sales history, the second highest district in terms of sales tax. And you can see that it's back to pre-COVID, pre-pandemic levels. Pretty local draw on the map to the right. And it's the gateway from the south. There's some unused parking in the back of the shopping center, which is identified right here. And so can that be a development opportunity? Yes or no? So that we'll talk about that. And the district has a large concentration of retail and residential. Pedro Point is one of the smaller districts, per se. But I think what was an interesting find is if you look at the red graph, it says that it didn't really get the negative impact of foot traffic during the pandemic. So I think you had a lot of folks still going there as a small-scale opportunity to go to maybe the grocery outlet or some of the other opportunities there. And it's got, a pretty local draw, all things considered. So access from Highway 101, it's a pretty vibrant center. There is a vacant 5-acre parcel, but it's got a lot of environmental sensitivity behind that property. So the question is, does that make any sense to develop in the long term? We're not sure about that. On the opportunity site analysis, we've got sort of 4 sites that we've identified that we want to get feedback from you all on. This is the current wastewater site that the city controls that has potential for a hotel, the one end of Sharp Park. Palmetto, the various sites along Palmetto. The quarry site. And the quarry site is probably 80 acres in total and has some hills within it, but this is the flat part of the site, which is about 39 acres. So the question is, does that make sense for either a hospitality expansion or other types of commercial or residential? And then the Seabowl site, as we look at it from an aerial, the question is the parking lot fully utilized? Can there be something in that parking lot that's an opportunity? We're not suggesting maybe developing in the hill area per se, but is there an opportunity at the outside of that parking lot to create some additional retail and maybe even housing? And then the back side of the Lindemar Center, which we just discussed earlier, it's about 1.9 acres. And for us, our next steps are to have this group discussion tonight. Obviously, use the feedback for our report, as I mentioned to you, get that to staff. We want to present ultimately to potentially to Planning Commission and Council. And then here's the discussion questions for tonight. And what we've done is we've printed for you 2 slides per page, not every slide that I just went through, but some of the salient slides that can allow for a discussion. We have 4 questions that we'd love to get feedback on. What's your reaction to the assessment of the business districts? Number 1. Number 2, are there ways to improve each of those business districts? Number 3, are there major challenges to development in those business districts? And then number 4, are there any specific opportunity sites that the city should or shouldn't consider for new commercial development? So that information is here, and it should allow you to write some notes, have a conversation. We're going to break apart now. I'll be happy to take some questions if you have any at this stage. Take a 1-minute break. If you've got some questions, we're definitely available. But the goal for tonight would be to have facilitators maybe come to each table and then have that open dialogue and walk through maybe this handout to get your feedback. Go ahead, question.
Just a question on the Placer system.
Yeah.
Is there any idea of the numbers that you showed on the what size group is that you're using?
Yeah. In term, yeah. Right. Is that something we can, is a number that we have? Can we quantify the number of inputs?
It varies on every site, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. We looked at another community where there was a downtown environment, and the sample size was so small, we were hard-pressed to actually make conclusions in that case. These sample sizes are large enough that we feel comfortable with the trips and traffic, but I don't know if we specifically have the numbers per se, because I think Placer is the one that's gathering that data, and then they're outputting to us. Because we subscribe to that as a platform.
Yeah, we do have some visits.
So we could share some visit estimates. There's estimates as to how many people are coming. I don't know if you saw that. So it's how many people are coming. There is that estimate. And also how many of those are unique visits. So if one person goes 3 times somewhere, and it says there's 1 million, there's really only 300,000 people, right? Because there's 3 visits per person. So there is that information that is available.
I think it's important to point out that what it does is that about 10% of the cell phones in the United States are being tracked. And we identify a geographic area, and then it tells us whatever time frame we want, this month, that, this time frame, it will tell you, okay, of all the people that we are tracking data, this many went here, and then the algorithm will convert it back to the whole population. So within Brockway, there might be a total of 100,000 visits in a year, while Palmetto might only have 30,000. So that's what we said, that the numbers are different, because every area has their own unique audience.
Yeah. That's a good question. Go ahead.
Is that how you got the 10,000 visits per day?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly how we, I mean, I can go back to that as an example on one of those if you want to take a look.
It's amazing, because it can tell you, you just give it any geographic location, time frame, and it will tell
Right. So to your question, Rick, in Pedro Point, annual visits are 871,000. And weekly visits are 16,000. The frequency is 3.8 visits per year. And then that can get down to granularly how many are unique, how many are the same person per se. And what's a little bit even more interesting, if you will, the demographics of those folks is also information that's available. So if you think about understanding who's coming and what the value proposition is or the spending proposition for different parts of your community, you can actually understand incomes and even education levels because the data is there interpreted by placer. Yeah, they're estimates. I mean, to be clear, they're estimates. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that, and I'll try. I was trying to repeat the question, but I will mic anybody who has a question. Do you have a question here? I'll give this to you. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that you'd done traffic studies, and I'm just wondering how that factors into this information now. Like for Lindemar, especially because of the beach, and like on nice sunny days, I hear, people don't even leave their homes. They plan their shopping during the week because they're stuck in traffic. People going to the beach, but also people going past to Half Moon Bay. So how does that factor in, as you're looking at development and increasing?
It's a good question about traffic. I mean, just to be clear, we didn't do a traffic study. We used data. We wanted to see the direction of where those folks are coming and going and when they travel as well. And the part of that point was, are they coming locally or are they coming from out of town? That was the comment that I made. If they're coming out of town, how do you capture them? If they're coming out of town, why are they coming and where are they going? And it's just to try to create an opportunity, to try to create a better understanding of what the opportunity is. Frankly, a low traffic count, low traffic count is not a great thing, right, for businesses and for development if it's going to be a commercial use. High traffic counts are a pretty positive thing for businesses to understand, hey, I've got a lot of potential customers. So that's how we use that information for the most part. I'll go to our traffic information. Yeah, we do have directional data that we used from our source. Here we go. Right. So highest days of travel being Friday. They tend to peak between 12 and 6. And we've got counts, Saturdays and Sundays between 12 and 2. Northbound traffic patterns are higher sort of in the mornings. And it's just data that I think can help businesses understand what's the opportunity for how many people are coming and going, and are they stopping or are they local? That's how we use that information.
So it's not really helping the discussion. Should there really be increasing?
Traffic being one of those key questions of, okay, well, wait a second, is this project going to cause more traffic or not? Is that intersection acceptable or not from a VMT or an EOS perspective? Those questions are different questions and still valid questions for projects. Yeah. Go ahead, question.
I'll pop up. And you can repeat it. It's an easy question. On the page of the new development revenue example, what is being used as an example of an upscale hotel?
Sure. And the question is, what's an example of an upscale hotel? I mean, there are some industry standards, and really an upscale hotel, it's not a luxury hotel. It's not at the highest end of that hotel. The lowest end of it is what will be called select service hotels. An example of a select service hotel would be a Fairfield by Marriott. The upscale hotel is going to be someplace in between. It would be Courtyard or nicer than a Courtyard, or even an Autograph Collection, which is upper upscale. I'm using some of the vernacular of the hotel industry, but it's a pretty high quality hotel concept. We're saying that because we wanted to understand that it's not a motel type hotel, so the value and the rates, the average daily rates that would be generated from a hotel like that are not going to be at the lowest of levels, certainly at a motel level. It's not thrifts. It's not even a Holiday Inn per se. It's, a Courtyard Marriott, a Hilton Garden Inn, things like that, or even potentially a little bit higher. So if you guys are okay, we can break apart and have some moderators. And the goal would be, we can take as much time as we need, but if we could do this over a 20-minute period or so, just want to be conscious of time, 20 or 30 minutes, and to have that discussion at each of the tables. I think you can stay where you're at. We can come to you. And then at the end of that, if someone would like to just summarize what the discussion was and what give 3 salient points, that would help us get the proper feedback. Is that fair enough? Go ahead, question.
Your intention that each of us comment on all 5?
You can comment on all 5. The question is, are you obligated to comment on all 5 districts? You don't have to comment on all 5 districts. If you have a comment because you're focused in on one or live in one or understand one better, by all means, just focus in on the 1 district or 2 districts, if you will. You don't have to say something about all 5. We would love to hear your feedback on those 4 questions, though, and then you can pick and choose on the districts. Okay? Yeah, actually, what's good right now is, Yulia, if you stayed at this table, then you can moderate. Christian, thank you. If you could bring those folks over there, you can moderate. And then we're going to get a moderator back for that back table. And I think we're set with three tables. Okay? And I guess, like Kevin said at the housing element, get more food if you need it. So if you need cookies and you need a break to get some food, please do it, and we'll get started here.
What does that question mean? You mean, are those opportunity areas as opposed to like a little section in Mountain? Or are you asking, are these big enough categories and places that should be looked at?
Consider a specific project, that type of project is you know, like Pacifica could be a getaway, but you know, still be at the beach. The mental health relaxation like we have now is sort of feeding into that. Lots of treats.
Okay. We're gonna try to get feedback from each team so that the other tables can the comments. I thought our table had a great discussion.
I'm sure each of you had an invigorating conversation, so we'd appreciate hearing about it. And Christian, I might pick on you to go first, if you don't mind, and if you could let us know the salient points, maybe give about a 5-minute overview or less if you'd like, on the questions and answers.
Thanks, Ken. Hello, everybody. Had a great conversation with June, Ramey, Christine, and Peter, and Ken was at our table. We jumped around a little bit, but we ultimately focused primarily on the Pacific Manor Shopping Center and Rockaway Beach, a little bit about Sharp Park as we sort of toggled between the north and central parts of town. In no particular order, I'll just sort of try to move quickly. Concerns about environmental constraints, particularly at the quarry, and so any future development there really needs to be sensitive to that and think carefully about what those are. Overall, the sense was that the districts identified by Cosmont were accurate and appropriate. A lot of focus in our discussion about hotel opportunities and really recognizing the coastal location, the ocean views, and how valuable that should be. But that really transitioned into discussions about appropriate specific sites. And we talked about the 2212 Beach Boulevard site, how appropriate that could be, but the sewer pump station and sea level rise and coastal commission, coastal act constraints. Similarly, in Rockaway Beach, thinking about a future where some or all of those hotels could be revitalized and maybe move up market, but the practical and legal constraints with the Coastal Act and sea level rise that really influences and could inhibit reliance on those strategies. There was a lot of concern in the various parts of town we talked about the sort of degraded visual nature, the deferred maintenance, the poor upkeep, the old sort of functional obsolescence, if you will, and how, while overall redevelopment would be great, there are, sort of short to medium term interventions that can be undertaken, tree planting, signage, facade beautification, activation with farmers markets, and so forth that show the energy and the vibrancy that the potential exists for that to encourage larger scale investments. And then really thinking, beyond hotels, really I think the next most important use was really restaurants and how this could be a real destination. Again, capitalizing on the ocean views, thinking about rooftop dining locations, rooftop decks, bars, et cetera, and how this could really be a destination that generates revenue. There's a sense that people really want those opportunities here in Pacifica as well as in those in San Francisco, and this could be a draw. People want to get out of the city, come into Pacifica for the ease of access, the beauty, the open space and surroundings, but there's just not the quite high enough level or the quality of the experience in terms of the business offerings that would be desirable as part of an economic development strategy. And along those near-term solutions, the Costco string lighting that can be thrown on the front of the business as a quick fix to make it look more inviting at night. Thanks.
That's great. All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Who's our spokesperson from this table? Okay. Okay, you got it. Go ahead, please, and you say your name if you don't mind.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paige. We talked a little bit mainly about how the influence of getting people to stop in Pacifica off of Highway 1, especially since as you come down Highway 1 through Manor, you kind of sink down below the level and you can't see. There's nothing there indicating that you're passing by shopping centers, that you're passing by retail or restaurants. There's nothing really there. So I think short term we talked about doing some signage, increasing awareness of what people are driving past. Long term would maybe have to do with redoing the freeway exits, because right now they kind of dump you off into a no man's land with the exception of Manor. Manor puts you off right there at the shopping center. However, Francisco Boulevard puts you off basically into a tow yard. You don't really, know that you're in a shopping district. The following exit for puts you down by the golf course, which really there's nothing there unless you're going to play golf. Again, the golf course being owned by the city of San Francisco, people utilizing it do not shop in Pacifica. There's no reason for them to. They get from the freeway right onto the golf course. Other things, we talked about some underutilized spaces. We talked a little bit about the obvious ones, but we also brought up the Samtrans park and ride area across from Lindemar, which is just a vacant area and prime real estate right next to our shopping location, our biggest tourist attraction, and it's just an empty parking lot. So looking into seeing how that could possibly be utilized or obtained access for the city. And then we also spoke about consolidating city resource sites. For instance, right now we have a community center here, prime real estate. We have our two libraries separated. City Hall in a different location, police station in a different location. If we bring those together into one location, into a nice, giving it a civic center feel, where you have your community center, your library, your City Hall in the same location, that'll allow the city to either utilize the other locations for other opportunities, or even selling them to recoup finances. And then finally, we spoke a little bit about the quarry and just how we feel like that being probably the most economically beneficial area here in town. It would be a great place to have a lot of central services, and like it's like the last solid rock, literally, on the west side of Highway 1. So there's not a lot of other places where we can do growth. And then Tom said he could fill in some of the gaps that I missed. So
Yeah, okay, I'm Tom Jarofsky with Cosmod, and before you joined, we had a couple of other ideas that were brought up. One of them was the lack that there's a kind of a lack of electric charging stations, that, you know, if we had more facilities, that's a great thing for people to come and stop, have lunch, dinner while their cars are getting charged up, putting them in, and you can put them in very small areas, so that's pretty easy to do. We also talked about how the Park Mall area, which is not actually part of our presentation earlier, but that area is, you know, kind of maybe ripe for some redevelopment investment. And as you talked about the Highway 1 bisecting the community, we talked about that, and freeway signage, and kind of the transit system being a pretty significant weakness for the community, in the sense of being able to, it takes 40 minutes to get to a BART station. We talked about the park and ride location. You know, here you have an oceanfront site for a park and ride. It's you know, it's pretty unusual. So I think that covers it for us.
All right, last but not least, Bobby, you're going to be the spokesperson?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, so I am Bob Valenti. I am also with Cosmont. Pull up my notes here. We covered a lot of the same topics that I think has been talked about already, but, you know, really looking at Palmetto, you know, could be looking at, you know, some infill in that area and some of those underutilized sites, you know, really looking for more engaging retail and restaurant that can, you know, really be focused on serving the community in that area. Pacific Manor, finding some ways to help local businesses with better signage. You know, there seemed to be some concern that, you know, signage, both wayfinding coming off of the Coast Highway and, you know, also just kind of within the centers, it's a little challenging to know which businesses are there. Really some potential to, you know, focus on a good retail mix as well, you know, drawing the types of tenants to those retail areas that, you know, kind of embrace the outdoorsy, the artsy, you know, the restaurants and engaging places, engaging stores that folks can enjoy. Some ideas that the Palmetto site, you know, really needs some more draws, some restaurants, you know, some kind of potential for walkability and you know, mixed use residential and commercial. Quarry site, you know, seeing that as a bit of an opportunity, but also, you know, some challenges considering infrastructure, considering sea level rise. But, you know, particularly that portion of the quarry site that's near the existing hotel area and other commercial areas could be a good kind of tie-in to build off of, you know, some of that activity. So some major challenges to development. You know, we've talked about sea level rise. We've talked about infrastructure, fires, landslides, and soil conditions. These are all, you know, challenges throughout the city. Limited transportation was also mentioned. and as well as community engagement get people on board to projects and new developments in the city. And then also just generally some other, opportunities to look at, more events, food trucks, trees, better, cleaning up some of the retail centers with facade improvements and landscaping and such. Is there anything else?
I really liked your rotating farmer market throughout that. That's something
Okay, yeah. So the idea of using events to help, draw people to different business districts on days that maybe that are a bit slower.
So what example would be moving the tree lighting every year to a different district or something?
Yep. So like Christmas tree lightings, moving it to different districts based on, whether areas could use a bit of a boost or a bit more activity. Same with, the farmers markets and outdoor concerts and festivals, stuff like that.
We recommend the hotel and the library show for a few days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and so seeing hotel and library development as good, anchor uses in the Sharp Park area that can really attract folks and from the community, from outside the community, into that area. Good.
Last, incentivizing small businesses to buy into the vision because we're all in it.
Sure. So doing some coordination with businesses to get buy-in and really kind of coordinating actions there. Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, I think in general, we have really appreciated the instructive and constructive input from the community. I think it's been very, very beneficial for our process, Cosmont's process. I want to thank everybody for coming out, spending the time. I'm going to give one more line that Kevin wants to tend to use, and that's eat more food, take some home, I think, Kevin. Was that the notion? And we really appreciate your input, and we're really looking forward to coming back to the city with a report, if you will, but really it wants to be something that's actionable as well, or has some notion that there's something that can change and improve for your community. That's the goal and objective, so that it advances the ball in conjunction with other things that are happening here, like housing element and obviously your general plan update, et cetera. So thanks very much for your time again. We appreciate the input, and we appreciate being here at Pacifica. Thanks to obviously the staff who we've worked closely with on coordinating everything. I think it's been really fantastic, and obviously council member support.